Hello, everybody. This is His Royal Highness, Dr. Stuart Allen Swerdlow.
And Janet Diane Moria Swerdlow.
And this is the Expansions News Podcast for the second week of August 2018. And by now, many of you have heard about what happened to Alex Jones being removed from YouTube, Apple, and Facebook because of his conspiracy theories that they considered to be violations of policy and hate speech and glorifying violence.
I think Twitter too.
Well, Twitter didn't, but now they said, well, now that we think about it, maybe he is.
No, they did. I saw that.
Yeah, so that just recently. And the streaming service Spotify also expanded a ban imposed last week on some of Alex Jones' content, and that he has lost his access to the Spotify platform. And Apple and iTunes deleted 5 podcasts related to InfoWars and Jones. And it says Apple does not tolerate hate speech, because I've seen hate speech on Apple before anyway. And it says, we believe in representing a wide range of views, well, except for certain ones, so long as people are respectful to those with differing opinions. Well, they're not very respectful, are they? And they said that Jones was accumulating strikes by violating the service's community standards, which they change as they see fit for themselves. They go on to say, when users violate these policies repeatedly, like our policies against hate speech and harassment of our terms, prohibiting circumvention of our enforcement measures, whatever that means, we terminate their accounts. In other words, if we don't like you, we pull the plug on you. And according to this, it also says Spotify has now completely banned InfoWars 2, Apple, Facebook, Spotify, all within 12 hours of each other, and apparently is considered to be a coordinated big tech censorship. On Monday this past week, Alex Jones said, America has been sold out and it is a communist-style censorship. And I actually have to agree with him. Now, I admit that I have not always agreed with Alex Jones. I've met him personally, and he really was not very friendly to me. But I do support his right to speak up and say whatever he wishes. I don't think it's hate, and I don't think that it's racism. I think he's just saying what a lot of people are not willing to say. Interestingly, Facebook says that it was all publicity stunt by Alex Jones in order to increase his membership. And actually, Jones says that because of what happened, he received 5.6 million new subscribers. So maybe we should do something like that. Let's say hateful things and post it on YouTube. No?
No.
Oh, well. Speaking of hateful things, let's talk about Iran. Because the U.S. has imposed or reimposed what they're calling crippling unilateral sanctions on the Iranian government, which has led to widespread unrest in many major cities, and people are angry at unkept promises by their regime. Donald Trump says he's asking for world peace by imposing the sanctions. The Iranian government's access to dollars will be severely limited, and the purchase of Iran's debt will be curtailed. Who wants to buy their debt? The Iranians will also be unable to buy precious metals on the world market. That means they cannot make jewelry anymore. Taken together, they represent a crippling blow to the Iranian trade, imports, and exports, and any nation that defies the sanction will be hit with reprisals by the U.S. For example, so basically what Trump said is, if you buy anything from Iran, then you cannot do business with the U.S. That's a big deal. So because of all of this, labor unrest has spiraled across Iran. Women earlier this year protested against restrictions on their dress and behavior in public, filming themselves removing their mandatory headscarves in public and dancing, a major taboo in the Islamic Republic. Maybe you should remove your headscarf and stuff like that, or other clothing, and dance around. I'll film it and we'll post it. Anyway, there were many protesters in Iran calling for the downfall of the regime, saying death to the dictator, who is Iran's current supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. And quite frankly, I'd like to see him kick the bucket too and go someplace else. And this is the interesting, and almost every week I tell you about how people are trashing Trump for what he's doing, and then I say, and they're glorifying what Obama did. Last weekend I told you how Obama actually had money given to terrorist groups across the world. Well, and now as far as Iran is concerned, during Obama administration, they actually lifted the sanctions on Iran so that the regime could hold on to power. That was nice of Barack, wasn't it? Anyway, the regime is in trouble, and the mullahs know it. The mullahs are not getting any mullah.
Guess not.
No mullah for the mullahs. And quite honestly, the same thing is happening in Turkey, where we just were.
Which I was disappointed to hear. I love turkey.
Yes, I like turkey on Thanksgiving. And I think that there will be major, and I don't like to use the word regime, let's say government changes in both Iran and Turkey, I think by November. Maybe it will be a birthday present for me. Now, speaking of Middle East, there is a rabbi named Yosef Berger who is in charge of King David's tomb on Mount Zion. Did you know that the tomb had someone who was in charge of it?
It makes sense, but I didn't know
What do you
that.
do with the tomb?
They lay on it, maybe.
Maybe. And he revealed to Breaking Israel News that there's a 600-year-old Jewish source that states that the third temple of Solomon will be prepared by descendants of Edom. And I don't mean the cheese. I mean Edom was a kingdom in the Middle East in ancient time. And this will be done as a reparation for destroying the second temple. And esoteric sources indicate that U.S. President Donald Trump has already begun this process, I imagine, by moving the embassy to Jerusalem and all the other countries. I apologize for the cat noises in the background. We have a Bengal cat who's part leopard and really doesn't like our podcasts. Why? Because she said we don't let her be on it. She has cat news or leopard news.
She was trying to be on it earlier.
Yeah, I think she's trying to contact the Leopard Liberation Force, and we won't let her do it. Anyway, according to this rabbi, it sounds illogical that the third Jewish temple will be built by non-Jews. Here's a clue. So was the first one. Because remember, King Solomon used demon or demonic entities to do it, and also laborers from Lebanon. So the first temple was also built by non-Jews. And the rabbinic sources explicitly state that what they must do is to fix the historic wrongs that were committed. So the non-Jews must fix what they did by building the temple. Now, in rabbinic literature, Edom refers to Rome, which largely comprised of Esau's descendants. Edom has also come to mean Christianity, which flourished in Rome. I'm going to disagree with all this in a moment. Many times in the Bible, we find that the greatest spiritual light comes from the most hidden sources, and that's because it's all coded. Now, I'm going to disagree with a lot of what's said in here, because Edom in Hebrew means red, and why? And it's also a reference to Esau, who was the brother of Jacob. Remember, she gave birth to twins, and God said to her that within your womb is two nations. So that means they're two different fathers. I
have a twinning story later on too.
Yeah. So actually the descendants of Esau created the Edomite kingdom, which was in the south of Israel and Jordan, not Rome. So actually where this kingdom was is very close or almost on where Saudi Arabia is building that new city. So maybe the Saudi Arabians will give money to build this new temple. So I disagree with the rabbis say. Sorry, Rabbi. Here's another interesting thing, which is many people know about Agenda 21, which I'll talk about in a moment. But 2 years ago, Agenda 21 became Agenda 2030. Did you know that?
I never even heard of Agenda 21.
Sure you did.
No.
It's about the extreme depopulation of targeted groups. And it's actually a rebranding of Agenda 21 into Agenda 2030, which according to this means that it's supposed to start to be implemented in 2025, and supposedly 90% of the people listening to this right now won't be here anymore. I don't believe that
That's
either.
what I was going to say. I don't believe that.
40 years ago, I heard the same thing about 1990, and here we are. Anyway, Agenda 21 is predicated on the notion of sustainable development in which some unnamed source will administer all energy on the planet, including transportation, food production, delivery, and blah, blah, all that kind of stuff. And the true nature of Agenda 21 can be seen in, guess who? Mr. Obama. When, the moment he was elected, or I say placed in office, he attempted to get the Senate to agree to an 80% reduction of energy consumption immediately. But fortunately for everybody, the industrialized world rebuffed much of this agenda from the UN and changed their name to 2030 and repackaged it. Now, it is clearly a thinly veiled announced intention to redistribute the wealth. It's abject socialism with the intended goal of the eradication of all private business that is not owned by a global consortium. And it's the reinstitution of feudalism as a means of governance, both politically and economically, especially for nations like the United States. And this wealth redistribution, both within and between nations, is the primary goal. Now, President Trump's economic policies are the antithesis of 2030 agenda. His tariffs are designed to promote fair trade and promotes nationalism, not globalism. And that's what's upsetting a lot of people. And Agenda 2030 is being implemented despite the fact that he's president, and that's why we are in the process of a civil war, which is something I will discuss in September. It's already begun.
At our September class.
Yes, it's already begun. It goes on to say in this report that Trump is actually the champion of the people. However, he's not playing ball with the globalists, and so they're very angry at him, and they cause the news to create these stories about him. The globalists don't care about Trump, and they have moved on without him. And I will do more research on this particular story and report back to you as soon as possible. Now, the next story, I have to say, and I've said this to you almost every week in the last few months, all the things that I have told you in the last umpteen years ultimately comes out on the news, even though it comes out maybe in an underhanded way. So, apparently there's a rogue planet that they have found. They're calling it Inhales. But
that's an odd name for a
yes,
planet.
And the reason is because its real designation is, you ready? SIMP J 01365663 plus 0933473. Now, can you imagine a passport from that planet? And how would you say your nationality or identity then? Anyway, they're calling it an absolutely massive alien world, which is nearly big enough to be classified as a brown dwarf. I won't repeat my brown dwarf. I got in a lot of trouble for that. Brown dwarf planets are sometimes called failed stars because they're nearly large enough to create fusion to take place in their core. But that's not the unique thing about this planet. You know what's unique about it?
Tell me.
Because this planet with a long name has a magnetic field 200 times stronger than Jupiter. And what's even more interesting, that on the planet's surface, it has a strong aurora, or northern lights, like here on Earth. But here's the problem, and here's the fake scientific news. Auroras on Earth are created when charged particles from the sun interact with the Earth's magnetic field. No. The newfound world has no star in its neighborhood, and so researchers are still not sure how planets like this are able to create their own auroras. Well, maybe if they read my books, they'll know that it's because it comes from inside the planet. and that there's an opening at the North Pole, and all the electromagnetic energy from the core material floating in the middle of the open area creates the aurora. That's why, people. And the planet's only 20 light years from the Earth, so we maybe should take a little weekend trip. And this leads me now to the Earth. Now, I say there is no global warming. Well, just last week in Colorado, balls of ice or hail the size of golf balls rained down on a zoo in Colorado, breaking windows, damaging cars, and sending animals and humans running for cover. It damaged buildings and animal habitats. It actually killed a couple of the animals. Dented vehicles in the parking lot. This ice falling in the summertime is really not unusual because it does come from thunderstorm activity. However, in the summertime, the Earth's upper atmosphere is not supposed to be cold enough to sustain that. So that means that the atmosphere is not warm, and that's why the ice would fall in the summertime. Now let's go from the atmosphere to under the ocean. Because a treasure hunter made a very interesting discovery in the so-called Bermuda Triangle. This explorer's name is Daryl Miklos, and he's been using secret maps created by his close friend and famed NASA astronaut Gordon Cooper to find shipwrecks in the Caribbean. However, during one of his adventures, he identified a submerged object with 15 300-foot-long obtrusions. So in other words, there were 300-foot things sticking out, 15 of them. That's confusing to say it. And he considers this to be an alien ship that crashed hundreds of thousands of years ago, and he wants to bring this alien spaceship to the surface. He went down there in a 2-man submersible and took images of it, and what he noticed, he said, shocked him, because it was almost like there were 5 arms coming out of a steep wall cliff, and each one of these is the size of a gun on a battleship. And he said there were 15 in total. These identical formations in 3 different areas do not look naturally made and don't look man-made. Certainly nothing I've ever seen based on my experience. This is him speaking. And I have experience at doing this. We've identified multiple different types of shipwreck material, and this does not match or look like any one of them. It's 300 feet below the surface, and he believes it's hundreds, if not thousands, of years old. Now, the astronaut on his map had written unidentified object on the chart that they were using to find this thing. And so he believes that Gordon Cooper meant it was something from another world. Gordon, and this is according to the researcher, Gordon believed in aliens. He was an astronaut, remember? He believed we had visitors from other planets, and he also believed that a lot of these things landed in this particular part of the world, which is Atlantis. During his post-NASA career, the former U.S. Air Force Cooper became well known as an outspoken believer in UFOs and claimed the government was covering up its knowledge of extraterrestrial activity. That was a big thing for an astronaut to do because they could lose their pension if they said such things. He said, he added, for many years I have lived with a secret. This is Gordon Cooper speaking now. And a secrecy imposed on all specialists and astronauts. I can now reveal that every day in the USA, our radar instruments capture objects of form and composition unknown to us. Miklos said Cooper often told him stories of UFO sightings and believed a lot of the world's technological advances had been passed on to governments by messengers from alien planets. Cooper even designed his own miniature UFO based on alien design he claims to have seen. I wish I would have that. And it's just another source, people, why this is in the news, because they're revealing the alien presence in a way that you will accept before a staged alien invasion, which is, I think, in process already.
All right. This so I have some very interesting stories for you.
As interesting as my own.
Fascinating. The first one I want to tell you about, which is interesting to me, is based on the Parkland shooting story. Now, that if you want to remember, that was Nicholas Cruz, who he confessed to having killed 17 people at the Florida high school. Well, now they just released a transcript of his first formal interview with police. So this is very interesting based on, because I want you to pay attention to this.
I'll pay attention.
Because of what I'm going to tell you in the following story.
Okay.
So this young man, Nicholas Cruz, claims that he heard voices in his head tell him to burn, kill, and destroy. And he also was overheard talking to himself, kill me, just effing kill me, and so forth. Then during the interview, he said he had used a lot of marijuana. He had taken a lot of the prescription tranquilizer,
I wonder if it was
Xanax.
synthetic.
He didn't say. And then the transcript shows that Cruz shook his head no when he was asked whether he understood his constitutional right to remain silent. Then, after extensive explanation by the detective, he eventually says he understands. And then he repeatedly tells the detective, I can't remember anything, dude. And then even when he was offered water, he said, I don't deserve it. So this is just now being released, and we're going to hear more about this. This isn't the end, but remember now, he had voices in his head saying to burn, kill, and destroy.
I hear this all this time.
Yeah, all these people who are committing this, they don't remember what they did. They hear voices in their head. They've been on some kind of drugs, either.
It's a voice-to-brain transfer from satellite for programmed people.
So this brings me to a very current story about the Holy Fire. Have you heard about that one?
Oh, yes, I have.
Okay, so this man, his name is Forrest. I thought that was interesting. Forrest Gordon Clark, who's 51 years old, who lived in Orange County. So here we have a forest fire, right? His name is Forrest. Fire is orange. We've got Orange County, right? And now we have a holy fire that is raging over 28 square miles near LA. Now, Forrest Clark is a Seventh-day Adventist. Went to a preparatory school in Orange County, went on to perform mission work, and the profile that they have, his Facebook says that he's a child of the Most High God. Now, apparently, when this fire began, it consumed all the nearby cabins except for his own. So as the fire grew, he gave a video to a reporter from the Los Angeles News Service on scene, and in this one he says, quote, I've been terrorized by MS-13 and 38th Street. They told me they were going to send 8 Mexicans, big Mexicans, and they were going to kill me.
Oh, big Mexicans.
Just telling you what he said. Asked if he knew how the fire started, Clark says, I have no idea. I was asleep. I had 2 earplugs in. I've been up for 20 days because he'd been given 8 downers for his ADHD, and then instead of making him sleep, he claims it kept him awake. He said, I just woke up, dude, and I got burned. I woke up and my stuff was all on fire.
So why did they think he started the
That
fire?
I never...
And how did he?
That I never got from this article. But they did take him into custody. He stripped down to camouflage underwear, and then eventually he went entirely nude. And neighbors said that Clark threatened the firefighters with a sword while they were battling the fire, and that Clark has a history of erratic behavior. In fact, last month he was placed on a psychiatric hold, and a volunteer fire chief who has a cabin in the area says every resident in the canyon is afraid of him, and claims that Clark sent him a text message saying, quote, it's all going to burn. Now, the Holy Fire is named for Holy Jim Canyon. So I thought this was interesting that this first one, Nicholas Cruz, says burn, kill, and destroy. This man says that these people have been in his head. He is a member of a church, Seventh-day Adventist. His name is Forrest. It's orange. He doesn't know what's happening.
Can't make that up.
And it's holy. And they've been this is all over the news is holy fire, holy fire, holy fire. So to me, that sounds like some kind of a New World religion preparatory event. What do you think?
I would say so.
Okay,
Especially
so
Seventh-day Adventist.
yeah. And if you remember, now I did a couple of mini podcasts. One was on Save the Earth programming and one was on paranoia programming. So it was a follow-up to those mini podcasts.
What do you mean? I have paranoid programming. What are you talking about?
Yeah, haha. So, according to this, where am I? One of the world's largest banks, HSBC, which is headquartered in London,
I thought it was Hong Kong.
No, it's London. It says the planet is running out of resources and warns that neither governments nor companies are prepared for climate change.
Well, that's all BS right
And they
there.
base
the
their-
quote should be it is BS. It should be HBSC, not SBC.
Well, apparently HSBC cited research from Global Footprint Network,
Right.
which, remember what I told you, that this means don't leave a footprint, which means like you're a ghost
Float
to your
over the
person
air,
and you
float over
don't
the ground.
exist. So then, and this was another interesting thing that have you ever heard of Earth Overshoot Day?
No.
Okay, well apparently this has been
Is that where planes land past the runway?
past the Earth, I guess. But they started this Global Footprint Network, which I just, recently now you're hearing this. They claim that they started tracking Earth Overshoot Day back in 1970. And
Never heard of it.
yeah. So back then we overshot Earth's resource budget by only 2 days. However, now Earth Overshoot Day is August 1st, which basically means that people have used up all the planet's resources for the year in just 7 months instead of...
Oh, and how did they figure that out?
So I just think this is still more things that input fear into people.
It's just ridiculous.
Give you that feeling of being limited and that finite, and it's more programming. But according to this, in our view, the analysts at HSBC said adaptation will move further up the agenda with a growing focus on the social
You can up
consequences.
your agenda.
Yeah.
Stick it up your agenda.
So anyway, I found that quite interesting that now this big bank is helping to program people.
How unusual.
And now you had brought up this story about astronauts. So the reason I put this story in is because a lot of people don't realize that astronauts' bones and muscles can actually severely decay, they do severely decay in space. So that's kind of why I'm putting this story out there, but I will tell you that there's a company called the Institute for Human and Machine Cognition that has actually created a robotic technology to help prevent this while astronauts are in space.
Well, that's going to be a problem since President Trump decided that he's going to create a new military unit, space military.
Yes, it's a big problem for people who go into space, and you don't realize that more than scientists, astronauts really have to be very athletically fit. So that's something they don't really tell you.
Then why do they pick old guys for the...
Probably because they're on the downhill side in their mind anyway.
So they don't care anyway, huh?
Probably. They're experiments.
They don't need bones in space, they float.
I guess not. And I wanted to follow up also, I told you about the golem. Now, you remember that I talked to you about a golem-like monster that was creeping through a forest in Quebec and
Yes.
Gaspe Peninsula.
Right. I think it was Trudeau, Prime Minister Trudeau.
And I also reminded you that a golem is a magically created entity from inanimate matter, specifically clay or mud. And in Jewish, they call this folklore, but I'm not going to say that it's folklore. And of course, there was a famous one from the Rabbi of Prague. You have to listen to that podcast.
I'm going to explain how you make one at the class.
So the reason I'm bringing this up again is because Theresa May, did you see the pictures?
Sure, she's a golem?
She did a curtsy, which was, she was called just like a golem in a skirt.
I know what she was.
Now, the thing that's interesting is this is a word you don't usually hear. It was in Lord of the Rings. Remember the little creature, the golem? Right? Okay.
Precious.
Yes. So now we're seeing this all over the place. So when she greeted Prince William,
She called him Precious.
it was an awkward curtsy. They're just supposed to like bob their head or something, but I mean, she did this weird thing. I can't even describe
she's weird.
it. But then they took a picture of her and they put a picture of the golem next to her from the Lord of the Rings.
Oh, she would have shown me that.
All over the internet. So again, golem is something that apparently you got to keep your eyes out because there's something about this that we have to pay attention to.
Ooh.
Right? So that's the end of my stories.
Okay.
But I did want to remind people that our September Spectacular is coming up. And so if you want to prepare yourself for that, I highly suggest Blue Blood, True Blood, and True World History, and also be a member of our site because we have a lot of videos on there that will talk about a lot of things to give you kind of prepared for what we're going to be teaching you. We also have coming up right after the September Spectacular,
Yes.
our series of webinars.
Yeah, and a lot of people have signed up already.
Yeah, I think the spots are over half filled. We have 20 spaces available. They're over half filled. If you're interested in this class, we have a special going on now for members only, so sign up for this class right away. And then, of course, I always remind you about our healing books, Hyperspace Helper, Hyperspace Plus, healing archetypes and symbols, and of course what we did on our last series of webinars, Decoding Your Life. We do have the webinar series on our members side. Took us 3 years to go through this book. This is on universal law. This is like a must-have for your library. So
Yeah, is there a discount for golems if they want?
there could be. They can prove their golem. There could be a big discount. Might give them
okay.
one for free.
Okay.
All right, and then
You go,
after
Golem.
that,
You go, Golem.
yeah, and I think after that you're going to go to Tampa,
I am.
and you're going to be talking about the Templar. So 2 T's, right?
Tampa's and Templar.
Yep, so that's going to be fascinating. And then in October, I think you're on the road again to the Albuquerque Stargate to the Cosmos Conference.
Yes.
And then, of course, we have our January class. So we always have lots of things going on. So be sure you like, comment, and share. Get the word out about hyperspace oversoul techniques and how to take control of your own mind before somebody else controls it for you because you don't want to be a golem.
And then you start hearing voices. That
Yeah,
you
that's
burn
bad,
things.
bad things. So take care of yourself.
Bye.
Bye.